It's only been a week since my last episode, and the world has gone crazy. We're out here bombing Iran and starting global conflict. The weird part to me is not that we're in conflict with Iran. We've been in conflict with Iran since 1979. The weird part is that so many so-called conservatives have turned into American bashing losers. Listen, maybe you're against regime change wars, and at even just the mention of Iraq, you start quivering at the knees, but this is so far from that debacle, it's not worth the comparison. We basically killed the entirety of the Iranian government with a few missiles. This isn't 100,000 Americans deployed attempting to nation build. This is a targeted decapitation of the worst regime on earth, and it worked perfectly. We'll see where it goes from here. Maybe I'll turn out to be wrong, but for now, all you panic cans out there just need to relax. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome in. We have one topic and one topic only that we're going to be talking about today, and that is Iran. We got a lot to get to. I wanted to talk about some of the primary losses that were kind of upsetting. Upsetting would be, I guess I should just say the upsets. Dan Crenshaw losing was a little bit of a shock. Jasmine Crockett also lost. I wanted to talk about that and have one last chance to make fun of Jasmine Crockett before she exits public life. But, we got important business over here. We can't just spend it making fun of Jasmine Crockett, however fun that might be. So we're going to talk about Iran today. But before we do that, my favorite comment from last week comes from at D Tucker 7427, who just said, bullshit. End quote. D. Tucker, listen to me. I want to assure you that what I said is not bullshit, okay? You're referring to Gavin Newsom, that video I did about him. I promise you, Gavin Newsom cannot moonwalk, okay? I promise. He can't. He's too white. I've seen it. I want to thank you for your comment, D. Tucker, and, just keep on with the engagement. Appreciate you. Anyway, let's get into, we got a lot to talk about. So topic one, the war with Iran. Dun, dun, dun. Obviously, this is a complicated topic. There are a lot of opinions, a lot of sides, a lot of history, and we could spend an entire series just going over our problems with Iran. So I'm going to try my best to do a 30-minute version that simplifies this problem, gives it a little bit of context, and talks about where I hope it goes. That's the goal of the show today. A little bit of history. Now, Iran is one of the more ancient civilizations. It's actually split. There's a bunch of different people. A lot of people have this mistaken idea that the Middle East is all Arab, and that's all it is. It's just a bunch of Arabs running around the Middle East. Well, it's not true in any country, and it's really not true in Iran, where there's really a difference between what you would call the Persians and the rest of the Arab world. And there's a lot of different ethnicities. You have the Kurds, who between Iran and Iraq have the largest stateless population of any group in the entire world. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about. We're talking about the history and the culture of Iran. I don't really want to get into all that because for right now, what's happening in Iran, it is not the most important factor. The most important factor I want to talk about Iran is the relative recent history, basically from 1979 moving forward. So, as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, until 1979, Iran was a monarchy. They didn't have a king, but they had the Shah, which is basically the exact same thing. It was an absolute monarchy. It was a hereditary monarchy passed down. And the Shah was, I would say, somewhat westernized. And if you look at pictures, if you go back, we've done this before on the show, I know. If you go back and look at pictures pre-1979 in Iran, what you found is that Tehran looked like New York. It's not the same buildings, not necessarily the same culture, but the women were very fashionable. The men wore suits. It was a Western-looking country in the Middle East. And part of this is because we had a warm relationship with the government of Iran pre-1979. So the United States government's like the Shah. The people didn't like him, which is how you wound up with a revolution. Obviously, you don't get overthrown when you have the majority of the people on your side. So the people didn't like the Shah for a number of reasons. Again, not really important to today's topic. But the Shah was overthrown, and he was overthrown by the Ayatollah. And the Ayatollah is a religious theocrat. He is a person who believes in Islam to an extent that he thought it should govern the lives of every single person on earth. And he started with Iran. So they overthrew the government. They implemented the religious moral codes. They implemented the Iranian National Guard, and basically these religious and moral codes. So what you see is pre-1979, you had these fashion-forward, westernizing, I wouldn't say they were Western, but westernizing country. And then they take a gigantic step backwards to the 7th century. And basically, now in Iran, for example, women can't walk around without their hair covered. There's mandatory hijab laws in place in Iran, which has led to a lot of protests. But it went incredibly backwards overnight, basically, is what happened. So since the founding, since this Islamic revolution, in 1979, we have been in conflict with Iran. This is not a new problem. This problem is older than I am. It goes back to, again, the 1979 when Jimmy Carter was president. And one of the first things that happened under this new regime was the hostage crisis in Iran. So again, some of the older listeners will remember this, and some of the younger people might not be aware. The Shah of Iran, the former leader who was in exile, was admitted into the United States. The United States allowed him harbor in the United States, and he actually came here to seek treatment for cancer. When he was admitted into the United States, when we gave him refuge, the people of Iran responded by overthrowing the American embassy in Iran and capturing hostages from the U.S. Embassy. So they took 52 hostages who were held for 444 days. Now, until Joe Biden was president, Jimmy Carter was probably one of the worst presidents that we had. And part of it was his ineffectual weakness on foreign policy. And the foreign policy decisions that Jimmy Carter made were god-awful. From giving the Panama Canal back to Panama, which was a terrible mistake, to this hostage crisis, which just made America look weak. So you had hostages taken by Iran. Basically, again, the same year that the government is overthrown and the revolution happens, one of the first things that they do is take American hostages. So again, since the inception of this regime, we have been in conflict. I wouldn't say at war, but in conflict with them. So what happens? Jimmy Carter is a failure because no one respected him. They thought he was weak, and he was. So they're held for 444 days during Jimmy Carter's presidency. When were they released? The day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office, because they knew Ronald Reagan told them. He said, if I'm president and you have hostages, we're going to kill you. Period. End of discussion. And they believed him because he would have done it. And so they release all the hostages. But again, this is the difference of what my opinion is about foreign policy versus some other people. You can't be an isolationist in today's world. It does not work. Peace through strength is the only way, by being so dominant militarily and through your actions that you force other people to play nice. That's the only way. Ronald Reagan was peace through strength. Threatening. It's not about the hostages at this point. If you don't give them back, we're going to kill you. That's it. Period. End of story. We're not negotiating. This isn't a conversation. You give them back or you're dead. That's peace. That's how you wind up with peace. It may seem harsh, but this is a harsh world, and you have to understand that this is a world in which it's dog eat dog, and at the top of the food chain, where all the predators are fighting each other, if you are so big and bad, people will not mess with you. So it's why a polar bear can walk through the jungle. No one's going to fight him. Now, obviously, there's not polar bears in the jungle, but you understand the point. When you look at a polar bear compared to a black bear compared to a lion, you say they're not going to fight you because they're self-interested. You don't attack. I'm not going to go and attack the mountain from Game of Thrones because I look at him and say, yeah, it's not a fight worth having. Maybe I'll beat him. Maybe I can win. It's not a fight worth having. So I just don't. So it's kind of the same in foreign policy. By making yourself big and bad and showing what you're capable of, this is how you achieve peace. So we had this right from the beginning. They fought a war with Iraq around the, So actually, before we get into the Iran-Iraq war, I want to talk about something. Many people don't understand this. And I actually have something I want to show you before we get into it. In Islam, you think of Islam as a religion, and it is. But you need to think of Islam the way that we think of Christianity versus Catholicism. So yes, Catholics are Christian, but there's a difference between Protestant and Catholic. And it was a big difference. They actually fought wars about this between the Protestant Reformation and Catholicism. There was a there was a 100 years long war that happened because of the Reformation. And we don't think about Islam like this because many people in the West are ignorant about what Islam looks like. But Islam right now still has this break that is so prevalent that they don't play nice with each other. So right now today, Catholics and Protestants, they play nice. They're not really fighting wars between Catholics and Protestants. Yes, some smaller scale things. We can look at Ireland. We can look at all these things. But for the most part, we're not fighting global conflicts between Catholics and Protestants anymore. That's not really happening. They still do in Iran. And the reason is, and here is the chart. I want you to take a look at this. Oh, excuse me. I want you to take a look at this real quick. Actually, I realized I need to make sure this is set up. And it's not. Perfect. Okay. Give me 1 second here. I realized I had this. There we go. Okay. All right. So I want you to look at this chart just real quick. So the difference in Islam between the different sects. Now you have your Sunni and you have your Shia Muslims. And the difference, this is just from memory. I don't have this written down, so forgive me if I'm a little off. But basically, when the Prophet Muhammad died, there was a break between two groups. The Sunni Muslims believed that basically the elders, the wise men of the caliphate, that they should have an election to vote for the next leader of the movement. And the Shia Muslims believed that it should be hereditary. So Muhammad had, I think it's a nephew or a cousin, forgive me for not remembering this off the top of my head, but he had someone named Ali who was either a nephew or a cousin. So they said, no, it should be hereditary. It should be someone who was related to the prophet that should take up the mantle. And there was this giant split, a bunch of assassinations back and forth, and basically started a war between the Sunni and Shia Muslims. Now, fast forward to today. That is still the case today. They don't play well together. So when you look at this chart, this is the chart of the distribution of Sunni Muslims in the Middle East. You'll see most countries, you have Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Yemen, Oman, Qatar, the UAE. Most countries in the Middle East are almost entirely Sunni. Many of them are overwhelmingly majority Sunni. You basically have Iran. Iran is the Shia stronghold in the Middle East. So right here, and Iraq is also yes and no. There's a giant population of people in Iraq who are actually not the majority. Again, you have the Kurds in Iraq, and you also have a heavy Sunni population, despite what this chart is showing. It's showing it's kind of a mix here. But anyway, Iran is the one really powerful Shiite country in the Middle East. So there is a war that happens between Iran and Iraq. They fight a war. Millions of people die. It's a terrible thing. And we basically, the United States, it's not necessarily that we take sides. We basically allow this to play out. But this is the fight between Sunni and Shia. And it's kind of the fight that happens right now and why when we get into it later. Actually, one more time. Let me bring up that chart just for one brief second. So when we get into this, we're going to talk about this in a brief moment. What you're seeing here is a power struggle that's been happening for 30 years where you have Iran, which is trying to exert its influence in the Middle East, and basically you have Saudi Arabia, which is also trying to exert its influence, but they do not play well together. They're not friends. We think of, oh, the Middle East, it's all a bunch of Muslims, and they all are buddies. It's not true. They are fighting a war, a proxy war in many cases, with each other through these other things. So Iran, again, up here, Iran, you see Lebanon, you see Gaza. You see these are the little Shia strongholds here, this little sliver. So Iran funds terrorism organizations in Lebanon and in Gaza. You have Hamas and you have Hezbollah right here. And the reason they do that is because, again, they are Shia strongholds, these little strip of land right here that everyone wants to fight over all of the time. And you see that little dot that's Israel right there. So basically this little tiny strip of land, Iran also has proxies and they fight a war. But this is the war we're talking about. So Iraq and Iran have a war, but really everyone is against Iran in the Middle East, and Iran funds terrorism basically against all of these countries. So no one really likes Iran in the Middle East, despite the fact that they are trying to exert influence as a regional power. They fund terrorism, as we talk about, and really the United States comes into conflict with Iran in many instances. But one of the big ones has been and one of the reasons we're fighting today, right now, is the nuclear program in Iran. So what happened earlier is that North Korea became a nuclear power. North Korea is, the nicest way to put it, an insane regime. And they have a population that is held hostage by a madman who portrays himself as a living god. And this is not an exaggeration. This is a real thing. Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, they have portrayed themselves as demigods or gods. One of them, I think it was the father, the founder of North Korea, they said that he actually didn't have a butthole. He produced no waste. He was a perfect human being. He was born without a butthole. That's a real thing. Look that up. Or when he went to play golf for the first time, he hit 18 hole-in-ones. It's unbelievable. But they're a crazy regime, but they haven't been toppled because they managed to conduct an above-ground nuclear test and prove that they possess nuclear weapons. So the only reason that regime stands today is because they became a nuclear power. So the West has looked at Iran and determined that we can't let Iran, the gigantic, largest funder of terrorism in the world, we cannot let them become a nuclear power. So they've developed a nuclear program. They say, hey guys, this is me playing the Ayatollah. I say, all right, death to America. Yeah, that's over here. But over here, I'm going to say I need this nuclear power for completely non-military purposes, guys. I understand that I have some of the largest oil reserves in Earth and that we don't need nuclear power here. However, just believe me when I say we're not going to use it for bad things. That's me doing my best Ayatollah impression. Of course, if I was doing an Ayatollah impression now, it kind of looked like this. Because he's dead as shit. but that was my impression of him before. It was pretty spot on, if I do say so. So there's this giant thing that we have a conflict with them because of their nuclear ambitions. Obama comes in. He makes a deal. When the Obama deal first comes out, I say, all right, yeah, that sounds good. It'd be great if we can prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. They say, we made this deal. They're not going to do it. They pinky promise. It's going to be great. And then we give them bundles of cash from all the sanctions that we had on them. Literally fly pallets full of money to Iran to drop them off. And then some of the details of the deal come out. Like, it expires after 15 years, and we're actually not allowed to conduct unannounced inspections of their nuclear facilities. So we're just supposed to take their word for it. This is not trust but verify. This is just, trust us. Trust the Iranian government. This is a terrible idea. So Obama comes in, he makes this deal. Again, initially I say, yeah, it sounds good. And then you read the details, you say, that's a terrible idea. They're definitely going to get a nuclear weapon because of this. So what happens? Obama comes in. Then you say, well, Hillary Clinton's obviously going to continue this when she wins the presidency, but she doesn't win the presidency. Donald Trump wins the presidency, and what's he do? The first thing he does, he kills the deal. He puts a maximum pressure campaign on Iran, cranks up the sanctions, says, no, you don't get a nuclear deal. And I say to myself, okay, this is great. It's great. We're going to stop them from getting a nuke. This is awesome. At the same time, you have Israel, who manages to infect the computers of the facilities and slow down the nuclear program in Iran. And this is great, again, because they've basically set it back. It sounded like a decade or 5 years. So you say, oh, well, this is awesome. And then what happens? Donald Trump kills Qasem Soleimani at the end of his presidency, the first term, and nothing happens. He kills the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Corps, and he kills him. He murders him with a missile. It's great. Again, I support it. That man, Qasem Soleimani, he's a bad guy. And because he's a bad guy, he deserved what he got. But nothing happens. It's great. Then Biden comes in. And what happens again? Biden says, well, we're going to go back to the deal that Obama struck, this terrible deal. And we're going to relax the sanctions. Because what we really need, guys, is to bring Iran into the fold of nations. You know how it worked with China, our number one adversary, when Richard Nixon did it? Well, that's what we really need. We just need to play nice with Iran, because if we're nice to them, they'll be nice to us. Now, I understand that their supreme leader gets on television regularly and calls for the death of America, calls us the big Satan. However, that's just for show. He doesn't really mean it. He's a nice guy. So again, Biden starts flowing them pallets of cash, which, by the way, those pallets of cash were used to fund Hamas, which caused the massacre on October 7th in Israel. And again, we can lay that at the feet of the Biden administration, another gigantic failure that is his fault. So, okay. So we wind up at this point in the last 5 years where Iran has been completely cut off from their proxy arms. So again, as I said earlier, Iran funds terrorism in the Middle East that comes through Hezbollah and Hamas that are funded from money that comes from Iran. Well, what happens when the Hamas attack, when the massacre on October 7th takes place? Israel says, well, you're done. And Israel fights a war against Hamas and completely destroys Hamas. And then they go and they do the same thing to Hezbollah. They completely destroy the military capability of Hezbollah. And so, and the United States helped a little bit, but it was Israel. Israel did that. And now Iran sits there and goes, oh, shoot, well, we don't really have the wherewithal to conduct war in the Middle East, because normally what they would do is they'd threaten to send missiles into Israel. They'd say, well, you can't attack us. We're gonna bomb you. Well, they don't have Hamas, and they don't have Hezbollah. They just have Iran. And what we found out is that in 2025, so early last year, Iran was enriching uranium to upwards of 60% purity. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about this, which includes myself, you say, well, I don't know what that means. 60% enrichment of plutonium is basically weapons grade. So when you look at this, you say there are absolutely no plausible civilian justification for enriching uranium this high. They are obviously have nuclear ambitions. They're lying if they say they do not. So last year, Donald Trump blows up the nuclear facility at Fordo, which is the big nuclear testing facility buried underground, used a giant bunker busting bomb to blow the entire thing up. And I was all for it. As you can go back, you can watch the podcast. I was cheering it on, said, yes, this is what we should have done a decade ago. We should have said, you don't want to negotiate? Fine. Blow them up. That's what I think. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear bomb, period. End of story. So we blew it up. And what happened? Well, you had a bunch of people on the Republican Party, led by Tucker Carlson, who said, well, this is the worst thing in the world. And there's going to be World War III, and Iran's going to attack us, and you're going to see thousands of Americans dead, and blah, blah, blah. Well, what happened? Where was the backlash? Iran fired a couple missiles at a base of the United States. By the way, they told the United States they had to do it. They called the United States. They said, we're going to send a couple missiles your way. It's not a big deal. Just to let you know. They shot a couple missiles. Nothing happened. No one died. It was over. But all these people, Tucker Carlson, who is just absolutely wrong about things, he just said, well, this is going to be the World War III. Nothing happened. It was great. Rousing, 1,000% success. Congratulations, Donald Trump. Well, in December, in Iran, December of last year, so 2025, you had protests that were breaking out in the country against the regime for a number of reasons. And you've seen this time and again in Iran. What happens is you have protesters who get out in the streets. Iran winds up shutting down the internet. They kill a bunch of them, and that basically stops the protests. Well, in December, these protests started. Donald Trump comes out and he says, if Iran starts murdering their civilians, we are going to do something about it. We're not going to let them just indiscriminately murder people. Now, Iran comes out. They murdered somewhere between 30,000 and 60,000 Iranians. I don't know the exact number, but it is somewhere between there. And I'm not saying I don't know, and I'm saying that they don't really know the exact number. But I've seen reports somewhere between 30,000, upwards of 60,000 people are murdered in Iran during these protests. So they crossed the red line. They killed everybody. So Donald Trump is put in a position. He said he was going to do something if Iran did this. Well, what do we do? Do we do nothing? Everyone who's upset, they say, oh my God, one of the American missiles, it fell on a school and it 40 people died or whatever the case may be. I've seen so many reports like this. I didn't hear any of you complaining about the 60,000 Iranians who were murdered by their government. Casualties, collateral damage happen in war. But I think that the Iranian people themselves that are out in the streets celebrating the United States attacking and killing this regime. So we launch missiles into Iran. We coordinate with Israel. We launch attacks into Iran. And we basically kill all the important people in the government. Now, I want to show you another chart. This one's a fun one. We can all celebrate. So here's a chart. These are the people of the key members of the Iranian regime. And these ones in red are the ones who are confirmed killed. So you have the supreme leader himself, highlighted red. He's dead. He's the first one. We hit him with the first missile. Then underneath him, you have the Supreme National Security Council. Well, this guy, the secretary, whatever his name is, Ali Larjani, he's alive. But this guy, the head of the National Defense Council, he's dead. Oh, man, I'm going to just butcher these names. I apologize. You have Ali Shem Kahani, the head of the National Defense Council. He's dead. Then you go down to the armed forces. You have Saeed Abdulrahman Mousavi, the chief of staff of the armed forces. He's dead. Then you go under him, the Revolutionary Guard. Mohammed Pakpour, who's the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guard. He's dead. You go down here. You have Aziz Nazardah, the defense minister in the cabinet of parliament. He's dead. You go down here to the head of the military bureau. He's dead. The military intelligence chief. He's dead. The head of the Organization of Defensive Innovation and Research. He's dead. So we basically hit Iran with a bunch of missiles. We kill half of the most important people in their government in a day and a half, and that's it. This is not nation building. This is not even regime change. The CIA handed Israel a no-kill list. They said, you're not allowed to kill these people. Why would they do this? Because we're not interested in regime change. Because the United States actually doesn't want regime change. What we're doing is we are moderating the regime. We're killing the worst people, and we're going to let the more moderate people take over. Now, the Iranian people have a voice in this, and they can do what they're going to do. I would encourage them to overthrow the government and implement democracy, and it'd be great. I don't know if that's the best case. And I don't know if we are going to be able to accomplish that. But when we kill bad people, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think the Ayatollah was a friend of the Iranian people. I don't think that. I don't think the Iranian people liked him. I think the 60,000 people in his own country that he just massacred in the last 2 months are evidence that he does not care about his own people, and the people don't like him. So I'm not going to sit here while a bunch of Americans want to tell me how evil the American government is for doing this while the Iranian people are celebrating in the streets. It's the same thing with Afghanistan, where you had Americans who would tell you, oh my gosh, it's so terrible what the Americans did in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then you ask people who were there and they say, oh no, not all of it. Not all of it was bad. Yeah, Saddam Hussein was a really bad guy, and it's good that he died. What's bad is the 20 years that followed that we kind of messed up in Iraq, but the war in Iraq was not a mistake. Oh, man, I know what you're thinking. Now, how crazy that I'm going to sit here and defend it. But I am. Actually, I have a book I wanted to show you. It's a short book, so you could read it. Christopher Hitchens, not a conservative. Christopher Hitchens wrote this book. It's called A Long Short War, The Postponed Liberation of Iraq. And to me, the Iraq War, which everyone's so afraid of, the Iraq War was a complete success because the Iraq War took like 3 days. The Iraq War, we took, I think at the time it was either the fourth or the fifth largest army in the world, and we completely destroyed it. It took us less than 3 weeks. The Iraq War was not a mistake. The occupation of Iraq that came afterwards, we made a ton of mistakes. And those are two different things. And so when you're talking about Iraq, you have two different things. You say, toppling Saddam Hussein was not necessarily the worst thing in the world. What came afterwards, the occupation, the idea we were going to put a democracy up in Iraq and everything was going to be great and we were going to make it look like Wisconsin, that was a mistake. That was never going to happen. We didn't understand what we were doing. We made a lot of mistakes. That's not what we're doing in Iran. 100,000 people are not landing in Iran to implement Madisonian democracy. That's not what's going on. And it's not a bad thing that a guy who funded terrorism around the world, who's responsible for the deaths of Americans, is dead. So what comes next, it's not going to be worse. Now, it might not be better. We don't know what comes next, but it's not going to be worse. It can't be worse than that guy. Just like it couldn't be worse than Saddam Hussein. You say, I know what you're saying. You're saying, hold on, Tyler. Whoa, how could you say that? Because ISIS came because of that. ISIS didn't happen because of the occupation of Iraq. ISIS happened when America left. And it left a vacuum, and we didn't help the people of Iraq, and we created ISIS within the vacuum. It never happened. You notice ISIS didn't exist when America was in Iraq. Just like the Taliban didn't control Afghanistan when America was in Afghanistan. America we're currently in over 90 countries in the world. We operate in over half of the countries in the world. And you're going to tell me that our intervention in Iran is too much? No, it's ridiculous. It's crazy. The other thing that I've seen, and this is, again, from the terrible, awful people on the Republican side. You see it some on the left, but in this case, it's coming from the Republicans that I have a real problem with, is this stupid, misplaced sense of anti-Semitism that just drives me insane. The Jews are forcing America into this war. That's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. They'll point to this thing Marco Rubio said in a press conference. They'll say, Marco Rubio said that the Jews, Israel, told them that they were going to attack and they were going to do it regardless. And we were worried about blowback on us, so we had to attack with them. They brought us along into this war. No, listen to what he said in the same day. He said, no, that's not what was going to happen. We were going to attack Iran regardless. We needed to. We needed to do this because Donald Trump set a red line and the attacks on America and Israel were imminent. It had nothing to do with the Jews bringing America along. Do you think, this is always the thing I want to just ask, a guy like Tucker Carlson, do you think that Donald Trump is getting led around by the nose by Israel? They got him, they got his nose, and they're pulling him along. They say, you do what we want, Donald Trump. Have you ever listened to the president speak? Do you think anyone in the world tells him what to do? It is absurd. It is an absurd contention to say that Donald Trump is being told by the Jews that he has to attack Iran. Donald Trump has made it very clear what his thoughts on Iran were. When he bombed the nuclear facility, it wasn't Israel saying, well, you have to do this. It was because he has been saying, we cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. He's been saying it for a decade. Why do you think it's different? The first thing he does when he's in office the first time is pull out of the Iran deal. He says, no, this is a bad deal. You're not getting a nuclear weapon. Knock it off. It's the first thing he did. So I'm not surprised by this at all. I think the only surprising thing is we're learning who our real partners are today. I was sent a video earlier by my friend Eric, and it was great. It said some things I wasn't aware of. We're learning who our partners are. The Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Oman. These states have signed on. They say, we're in. We want to fight. Let us help. We will help any way we can. Let's do this. They have offered themselves to America, to Israel even, which is crazy to think that all of these Arab states are going to say, we'll work with the United States and Israel to fight Iran. Meanwhile, Britain didn't let us use their bases to conduct this initial assault. Britain, our longest, oldest ally. Oh, Britain, we have so much in common. No, we don't. They're not our ally in this regard. They're not. Just like France, just like Spain. It's ridiculous. Britain used, I saw this again in the video I watched earlier. The British government basically said, we're not going to allow our company to insure the vessels traveling through the Strait of Hormuz, which basically are going to disrupt global shipping. And it was going to be used against America to prove a point. It would raise prices on things. It would raise prices on oil. It would do a lot of things that would harm America. And Britain revoked insurance to the ships to stop travel through this place. So Donald Trump came in and said, well, we don't need you. Donald Trump has guaranteed shipping through an American company for all the ships traveling through to avoid a disruption. We have just taken Britain out of the equation for who is important in this world and who is not. And they did it to themselves. They sidelined themselves. They could be standing beside us as our number one ally, and they've chosen not to. And it's sad to think, but the fact that Saudi Arabia is being a better ally to us right now than Great Britain is sad. It just is. And we'll see what happens. I don't know where it goes. I don't know where it's heading in the future. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't either. Anyone who's telling you they do, they're lying to you because they do not know. You can make predictions. I have predictions. I actually think this is going to work out fine. Okay, that's my prediction. I don't know. Who's going to be in charge of the country? I don't know. Is it going to be the son of the Shah? Are they going to have an election? Is it going to be somebody from the government right now? I don't know. Is it going to be the Ayatollah? No, he's dead. So I know it's going to be better than that. That's what I believe. And I hope beyond belief. I have some Persian friends, and they're the wonderful people. The Persian population, the Persians are unbelievably great. The same with the Kurds. I can't say I have Kurdish friends. I don't think I know anyone personally who's Kurdish. But the Kurdish fighters, our allies, they have been wonderful. And I hope that the Kurds and the Persians and every other person in Iran gets to rise up and have a country that is good for them and promotes human flourishing and doesn't restrict them and murder them mercilessly for voicing opinions. That's what I hope. And we'll see. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. All I know is last year, all of the people predicted World War III was going to happen because we blew up their nuclear facility, and nothing happened. And so everyone who's saying it's going to be World War III, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think Iran has partners to make this World War III. We're not going to have a ground invasion of Iran. We don't need one. We'll see what happens, and we'll see. It already is sad. We've had American casualties. Every single person who dies serving America is a hero. But at the same time, let me say one thing. The people who want to say that one military death is too many, they're not children. They're not. You sign up, you understand the risks, and it happens. And it's sad, and we don't want it to happen. We want to avoid it. But using American military for what they're for is important. And we can't be pacifists. We can't be isolationists. People are going to die. And I don't want anyone to die who's not a bad, evil guy. I don't want Americans to die. I don't want innocents in Iran to die. But these things happen in war. I just know that I want everyone to be safe who is a good, decent person, and all the bad guys to be the only ones that suffer. But we don't live in the fantasy world. We live in the real world. There's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be American casualties. And the fact that we managed to kill half of the leaders of the government of Iran, and we've had, I believe, I could be mistaken about this, I think we've had 4 American casualties at this point. It is an unbelievable success, and I know that sounds cold, but it is true. 4 American lives were lost, and that is terrible. But we have already accomplished most of our goal in Iran. We didn't need 100,000 troops to do it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for the week. This is obviously, again, this is a long, complicated topic, and this is barely scratching the surface of it. But questions, comments, concerns, leave them in the space below, and I will respond to you. Maybe we'll talk about it next week's show. We'll see what happens in the future. And like I said, I hope everyone is safe. I hope everyone has a great week, and I will catch you guys next Friday.